We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's special edition, we are talking the inauguration, what comes after the inauguration. We're talking about the confirmation hearings for Trump's cabinet, and we're talking the Israel-Hamas deal, what that means, what's going to happen. Please remember, Liberty Nation Radio is sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Thanks for being here. Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. We're very fortunate to have with us in this pre-inauguration special, Liberty Nation's executive editor, Leesa K. Thanks for being here, Leesa.
Hey, Mark, how are things across the pond?
They're all right. The country's getting excited about the incoming Donald Trump administration. Well, let's say at least about 50% of the country's getting excited about it. Much is the same, I presume, over on your side of the Atlantic.
Indeed.
So there's it does seem like that. Obviously, the people who voted for Donald Trump are massively enthused by what was, let's be fair, an incredible comeback story, a very American comeback story, if I may say so. But there's also the side that voted against Donald Trump. And it seems to me that rather than what we had in January of 2017, where those memes are still going, by the way, the screaming at the skies from the soon-to-be TDS sufferers, it seems that there's actually quite a quiet acceptance that Donald Trump is coming back.
You think so? Well, that's interesting that you say that, because I was just listening to Joe Biden's farewell address, and I thought to myself, are we over the election yet? Hello? You know, it just seems like the Book of Lamentations is getting longer and longer and longer.
Well, you know, there's something very political about that, because I also obviously tuned in for the farewell address, the long kiss goodbye to the nation after 50 years, and it really felt to me that somebody had come up with this idea that what you need to do is a campaign ad, and that's what it really felt like, a campaign ad. Now,
yeah, definitely.
Who was he campaigning for? Well, it certainly wasn't Joe Biden. Joe Biden's wandering off into the sunset. And it wasn't Kamala Harris, because they're never going that route again. Let's be fair. She terrible candidate at a terrible time.
Never say never in politics.
Never say never in politics. Well, let me quote back to you, F. Scott Fitzgerald. There's no second act in American lives.
Yeah. A good one.
Although
F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Yeah. Although obviously Donald Trump has had his second act. Although you could argue that this second act is actually just a continuation of the first act, but they chucked the 4-year intermission in there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the argument. But yeah, it seemed like a campaign, and it was aimed at giving Democratic Party activists and hardcore Democrat Party supporters, I think, a reason to go on with the fight spirit over the next 4 years. What do you think?
Well, I think that there's a lot of celebration over on the right, and there's a lot of lamentation over on the left. And, you know, we have to get to the spirit of working together, or nothing's going to get done. And a lot, unfortunately, needs to get done at this point. I mean, it really does. So we've got to get our ducks in a row. My husband was just saying to me, imagine what it's going to be like when the debt clock starts going the other way. Like, instead of going up and up and up and up, it's going to go down, 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 down. And that is a possibility, you know, if we play our cards.
It's a possibility. It's a possibility.
I see you're not too hopeful, but, you know, I am. Because I was just listening to Stephen Moore, who's a brilliant economist. And, you know, what we need to do is grow the economy. We, you know, as he said, we don't have a income problem in America. We have a spending problem in America. And we're spending way too much money on stupid stuff.
Yeah, well, that's the whole purpose of the Department of Government Efficiency, isn't it, under Musk and Ramaswamy? And I think, yeah, you and I know, you know, we balance budgets for ourselves all the time. And obviously it's a very different animal, the US federal government versus a budget for a business or for a home. But the idea that you can just stop spending a certain amount, well, that's actually quite feasible. So if you consider the couple of trillion that was added in the last couple of years, I mean, it's about $1 trillion a year now, I think it's going up.
Right.
And this is spent not just on the things that are I've forgotten the word off the top of my head, but it's things like Social Security and whatnot, just 2/3 mandatory spending rather than, I guess you'd call it non-mandatory spending. But in that discretionary spending, thank you, Leesa, thank you. So within that discretionary spending, the only reason it gets spent is because presidents are pushing for big package bills, and then every senator worth his salt is trying to come up with, well, we need a few billion here for this in my home state because that's going to help me back home, or that will at least help the people in the state back home. And if you just stop putting through extra bills, surely the rate of spending will at the very least flatline, rather than, if not necessarily go backwards, but it will at least flatline, which would be quite an interesting occurrence in itself.
Well, it doesn't surprise me that we're going down a bunny trail, but with the economy. But let's face it, Trump actually won the election largely on the economy. And I would think that's going to be a theme and variation that he's going to bring up in his inaugural speech.
Yes. Yes.
I think he's really going to be paying close attention to that. He does seem to have a hand on, and understanding intuitively about business and how to make money instead of just spend money. I kind of liken it to when I was a little girl, you would go to the movie theaters with your parents, and the movies were so long, they were called epics. So long that you would have this intermission. During the intermission, you could run to the, concession stand and get your Milk Duds and your M&Ms, and then you'd run back, and then the orchestra would play an encore, and then the curtain would go up and the movie would start again. And this is like Trump's great reset. It's his second act. It's the intermission is over. We've all gotten our Milk Duds, and we're sitting in our seats, and the curtain is about to go up this week.
I love that you call it the Great Reset. It's quite. I've actually just finished a book by Alex Jones entitled "The Great Reset." It's a good book. It's a good book. Good if you want a nice insight into the mind of Alex Jones. Very interesting. But yes, so it is in a way a great reset because you're putting it back to a point, and that point was the intermission that took place with Joe Biden's entry into the Oval Office. And I think almost everybody can agree that things were going very, very well during the first Trump term until COVID came along and derailed pretty much everything that he was trying to do at the time. Now, assuming there's not another COVID, although I expect the federal response as well as the state response would be very, very different this time around if there are such pandemic. Lessons learned, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it really just seems like it's a continuation of the second half of the feature. Books used to be released, like comic books and things used to be released in serials. And even some major books, literary greats, were released in little serialization, so you'd have to wait. And I remember the last person, there's complete bunny trail here, but the last big person to do this was Stephen King with the Green Mile book, which was released in 6 separate parts, and so I had to wait 6 months to read that whole thing.
It's like waiting for the end of Yellowstone.
Yeah, there you go. So we're going to talk about Trump's either second act or end of his first act after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.